Have you ever read something that felt too real to be fiction? A story that crawled under your skin, whispered to you at night, and made you wonder if the author had actually seen what he described? That's the feeling millions have had after discovering the Necronomicon, the fictional grimoire of Lovecraft that became reality. A book that was never supposed to exist, yet somehow people claim to have read it, touched it, even used it. Maybe you felt it too, that strange pull toward the forbidden, that curiosity that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., scrolling through old myths, secret manuscripts, or lost knowledge humanity wasn't meant to uncover. What if one of them wasn't a myth at all? What if Lovecraft didn't invent the Necronomicon, but remembered it? As you'll see in this documentary, behind the fiction lies a labyrinth of real rituals, historical clues, and psychological truths that still affect people today. Once you step inside, you'll never look at imagination the same way again. But before we dive into the shadows, I want you to do two things. Like this video to help more seekers find it, and comment below if you've ever read Lovecraft's work or heard of the Necronomicon. Your story might be the next piece of the puzzle. More than 70% of Lovecraft readers, according to a 2022 literary poll, believe the Necronomicon might be based on a real text. Even Stephen King once said that what makes Lovecraft terrifying is not the monsters, but the feeling that his universe might actually exist. That's the paradox at the heart of this story. A book that never existed, yet somehow exists everywhere. The Necronomicon began as fiction, but it refused to stay that way. Like a shadow that becomes aware of itself, it started to move on its own. Lovecraft first mentioned it in 1922 in a short story called The Hound. He described it casually, almost carelessly, as if it were a known occult manuscript. But that single reference ignited something. Readers wrote to him asking where they could find it. Collectors offered money. Scholars debated its authenticity. Lovecraft, amused and slightly disturbed, kept weaving it into his tales. The Dunwich Horror, the Call of Cthulhu, at the Mountains of Madness. Each time he added details. Its supposed author, Abdul Alhazred, the year it was written, 738 AD. The meaning of its title, The Book of Dead Names. But here's where the story bends reality. After Lovecraft's death in 1937, bookstores began receiving letters from customers asking to buy the Necronomicon. Some even claimed to have seen it. A London publisher reported a man bringing in fragments written in an unknown language. In New York, a librarian swore that an Arabic manuscript labeled Al-Azif vanished from a private collection after being requested by 3 separate researchers, all of whom later disappeared. Coincidence? Or the strange gravitational pull of a myth that wanted to be born? The power of the Necronomicon lies in something older than Lovecraft: humanity's obsession with forbidden knowledge. Psychologists like Carl Jung saw in such stories the reflection of a collective archetype, the desire to confront chaos, to peek behind the curtain of reality. The book, real or not, became a symbol of that forbidden mirror, a mirror that shows what we secretly crave, to know everything, even if it destroys us. Lovecraft himself said he often dreamed of things too strange to describe. He suffered from sleep paralysis, and during these episodes, he claimed to feel presences whispering words in languages he didn't understand. Later, he would transform those sensations into fiction. But what if the Necronomicon wasn't pure invention? What if his subconscious had reached into something older, like a frequency, a vibration that ancient mystics once called Al-Azif, the sound of demons in the desert wind? Lovecraft didn't believe in the supernatural, at least publicly, yet he once wrote to a friend, "Sometimes I wonder if my stories are dreams sent to me from another time." Through this lens, the Necronomicon becomes more than a prop. It becomes a psychological artifact. It represents the mind's encounter with the infinite. In every age there's been a forbidden book: the Egyptian Book of Thoth, the Picatrix, the Key of Solomon. The Necronomicon follows this lineage perfectly. It describes, in Lovecraft's universe, rituals to summon the old ones, entities beyond time and comprehension. It speaks of cities that existed before Earth cooled, of cosmic truths that would drive men mad. And it's precisely that madness, that trembling edge between curiosity and terror, that draws us closer. Modern historians like Donald Tyson and Simon, who published their own versions of the Necronomicon in the 1970s, admitted that readers wanted more than fiction. They wanted proof. Simon's version even sold over 800,000 copies, claiming to be translated from ancient Sumerian tablets. Critics dismissed it as a hoax, yet occult groups began performing its rituals. Some reported visions, synchronicities, inexplicable sounds during the night. One practitioner described a sensation of vast emptiness followed by a presence watching me from behind. That's the echo of Lovecraft's genius. He tapped into a primal part of the human psyche that doesn't distinguish fiction from myth. Why does this matter to us? Because every time we read or hear about the Necronomicon, we confront that same question: what is real? We live in an age where stories shape reality more than facts do. Belief can turn imagination into existence. The Necronomicon teaches us that once an idea enters the collective mind, it no longer belongs to its creator. It becomes alive. That's why it's still whispered about a century later, because it embodies our fear and fascination with the unknown. Perhaps that's the true secret Lovecraft left behind. Not a book of incantations, but a key to our imagination's most dangerous power: the ability to make the unreal real. Fiction becomes memory, memory becomes belief, and belief creates its own universe. Somewhere between dream and madness, the Necronomicon is still being written, page by page, by those who dare to read it with their mind open and their sanity trembling on the edge. More than 1 million readers worldwide have searched online for the name Abdul Alhazred, a name born from Lovecraft's imagination, yet spoken today like that of a real prophet. Even Neil Gaiman once said, "We all fear that somewhere, someone actually found the Necronomicon." That fear began with this mysterious figure known as the Mad Arab. But who was he really? A fiction? A vision? Or a messenger for something Lovecraft never fully understood himself? According to Lovecraft's stories, Abdul Alhazred was a poet from Sana'a in Yemen, living during the 8th century. He traveled through the ruins of Babylon, the forgotten cities of Arabia, and finally into the vast emptiness of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, one of the most lifeless deserts on earth. There, after years of solitude and hunger, he claimed to have encountered beings not of this world and to have heard the voice of a god older than creation itself. When he returned, he wrote what he called Al-Azif, later translated as the Necronomicon. Lovecraft described him as brilliant yet cursed, a man whose curiosity shattered his sanity. But what's fascinating is how his fictional biography overlaps with ancient myth. The Rub al-Khali is said to conceal the buried city of Iram of the Pillars, mentioned in the Quran, the city of Iram of lofty pillars, the like of which was never built in the land. Arab legends speak of travelers disappearing there, consumed by a blinding light. Lovecraft, who read these texts, used them as the foundation for Alhazred's journey. But what if these stories were not mere coincidences? What if Lovecraft's so-called fiction echoed collective memories of something that truly happened? Esoteric researchers have pointed out that the structure of the Necronomicon, as described by Lovecraft, mirrors real grimoires, invocations, planetary seals, hymns to forgotten gods, and warnings to the reader. The book supposedly contains passages describing cosmic entities, Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, gods that exist outside of time. Alhazred claimed they once ruled the earth before humanity and will return when the stars align. But this mythology has deeper roots. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings descending from the heavens who gifted knowledge and demanded worship. The Egyptians told of Thoth, the god who recorded divine secrets forbidden to men. The parallels are unsettling. Psychologists might say Alhazred represents the archetype of the seeker who goes too far, the man who dives into the unconscious and cannot return. Carl Jung described such figures as visionaries possessed by what they discover. And yet, modern mystics claim that Alhazred's journey resembles the initiation of a Sufi mystic or a Hermetic adept. He withdrew from the world, fasted, faced madness, and returned with revelation. What Lovecraft called insanity might in another culture be called enlightenment. There are strange historical echoes too. In 1934, an Arabic scholar named E.M. Hussein claimed to have seen an ancient manuscript in Istanbul containing incantations similar to those Lovecraft described. Years later, the manuscript disappeared. In 1978, an occult group in London published a translation they said was based on fragments of Alhazred's writings. No one ever proved it authentic, but what matters is this: the myth kept growing, feeding on every attempt to expose it. Each denial only strengthened belief. And there's a psychological truth here. The figure of Abdul Alhazred embodies the human dilemma, our hunger for ultimate knowledge and the price it demands. Every era has its Alhazred: Galileo peering through his telescope, Tesla channeling ideas from unseen frequencies, Jung confronting his inner demons in the Red Book. They all faced ridicule, doubt, even madness. The Necronomicon becomes a mirror for that eternal pattern, the seeker who listens to whispers others ignore. When Lovecraft invented Alhazred, he didn't just create a character. He conjured a symbol of forbidden wisdom, of the thin border between genius and insanity. That's why people still search his name. Deep down, we all wonder what we'd do if we heard those same whispers, if the void suddenly spoke our name and offered us knowledge beyond comprehension. Would we listen? Would we write it down? And perhaps that's the real mystery. Maybe Abdul Alhazred never existed in flesh, but he exists in everyone who dares to look into the dark and ask the unthinkable question: what lies beyond the limits of human reason? Lovecraft might have given him a name, but the madness, the revelation, the temptation, it's ours. Over 2 million online searches every year try to uncover the true contents of the Necronomicon. Some claim to have seen it, others to have heard it whispered in dreams. But what does the book actually contain? What words could be so dangerous that even fictional scholars in Lovecraft's stories went insane just by reading them? When you peel away the myths, the fiction, and the fear, something deeper emerges, a strange mirror of human consciousness itself. The Necronomicon is often described as a book written in a language that defies translation. Lovecraft called it Al-Azif, the sound of the desert wind said to be the voices of demons. It opens, according to the legend, with an invocation to the great old ones, beings that dwell in the spaces between worlds. They are not gods in the human sense, but immense intelligences that exist beyond time, waiting to reawaken when the stars return to their ancient alignment. The book tells of how they once ruled the earth, how they fell into slumber beneath the oceans and mountains, and how their followers still serve them through secret rituals. But here's where it becomes more complex. Scholars who studied Lovecraft's descriptions noticed the structure of the Necronomicon resembles ancient Sumerian and Babylonian magical texts, hymns to deities, star charts, and instructions for summoning celestial forces. In the Simon Necronomicon, published in the 1970s, these elements appear explicitly. Conjurations written in Akkadian, seals resembling planetary sigils, and invocations to gods like Marduk and Tiamat. Even though that version was a modern fabrication, it struck a strange chord. People practicing those rituals claimed to experience vivid dreams, sudden synchronicities, and overwhelming sensations of being watched. Coincidence, or an unconscious link to something older than language itself? Psychologically, it makes sense. The human mind reacts to symbols before it reacts to words. Carl Jung called these deep images archetypes. The Necronomicon uses precisely these: the abyss, the serpent, the gate, the key, the awakening. Each carries layers of meaning across cultures. The abyss as the unknown self, the serpent as wisdom and danger, the gate as transformation. Reading or even imagining the book activates something ancient inside us, the same instinct that once made shamans fear their own visions. Lovecraft hinted that within its pages lies a ritual called the Opening of the Way. It describes the moment when the boundary between worlds dissolves, allowing communication with entities older than the stars. In psychological terms, that moment mirrors the dissolution of the ego, the point where reason breaks and the unconscious floods in. Mystics call it illumination. Psychiatrists might call it psychosis. Yet both are thresholds, and the Necronomicon dwells on that razor's edge. Some passages described by Lovecraft speak of words that twist upon themselves, a reference that modern cryptographers have tried to analyze. A linguist at MIT once demonstrated that an invented passage from the Necronomicon used phonetic patterns similar to ancient Phoenician, structured yet chaotic, almost human but not entirely. The effect, he said, feels like reading a dream that refuses to end. That's the essence of the Necronomicon. It speaks a language that bypasses logic and goes straight to the subconscious. Spiritually, that's powerful and dangerous. In every mystical tradition, there are warnings about words of power. The Egyptians believed that speaking the true name of a god could reshape reality. The Hebrews called it the Shem HaMephorash, the secret name of God. The Necronomicon uses this same idea, but instead of divine names, it invokes what Lovecraft called the outer gods, beings that represent the vast indifference of the cosmos. They don't care about humanity, they simply are. To read their names, the book suggests, is to dissolve the illusion of human importance, and this perhaps is its real danger. When Lovecraft's characters opened the Necronomicon, they didn't just encounter monsters, they encountered truth. The terrifying realization that humans are not the center of existence, that consciousness is just a flicker in an infinite darkness. Modern physicists echo the same revelation when they describe the universe as 95% dark matter and energy, invisible, untouchable, unknowable. The Necronomicon, written almost a century ago, anticipated that existential terror. Maybe that's why it still fascinates us, because behind its madness and horror lies a brutal kind of wisdom. That knowledge has a cost, and awakening means surrendering the comfort of ignorance. Lovecraft wrote it as fiction, but what he created was a philosophical mirror, a text that reveals not ancient gods, but the godlike hunger of the human mind itself. The Necronomicon doesn't just tell a story, it tells our story. The eternal quest to know what cannot be known, to speak what should remain unsaid, and to glimpse what lies beyond the fragile wall of sanity we call reality. In 1977, an occult practitioner named Peter Levender confessed in a private interview that while experimenting with rituals from the so-called Necronomicon, he felt a door open, not in the room, but in my mind. His testimony wasn't unique. Reports of strange phenomena, flickering lights, distorted dreams, sudden whispers, followed anyone who tried to reenact the book's instructions. Whether these events were real or psychological projections doesn't matter as much as what they reveal. The Necronomicon was never just a book about monsters. It was about portals, gateways between the visible and the unseen, between the conscious and the cosmic. Lovecraft described these gateways in cryptic language, circles drawn in blood, names that vibrate with forbidden resonance, stars aligning to form paths through dimensions. In The Dunwich Horror, the ritual performed by the Whately family opens a brief tear between worlds, allowing a creature to cross over. The language of the rite sounds like gibberish, yet it mirrors ancient Sumerian chants invoking gods of the underworld. That detail is key. Lovecraft, though an atheist, drew heavily from authentic occult structures. He mirrored the architecture of real rituals without believing in them. But belief wasn't necessary. The words themselves carried weight because of what they represented, the human attempt to touch infinity. Inside the mythology of the Necronomicon, there's a hierarchy of entities known as the gatekeepers. These are not evil in the moral sense. They are the custodians of cosmic thresholds. Among them, Yog-Sothoth is the most enigmatic. Described as the gate and the key, it represents total awareness, the point where all times and spaces overlap. Philosophers might call it the collective unconscious. Physicists might compare it to quantum superposition. To Lovecraft, it was both the source of enlightenment and madness. Those who invoke Yog-Sothoth see everything, past, future, and the unhuman vastness in between. And that sight shatters the mind. The book speaks of three principal rituals: the opening of the way, the calling of the watcher, and the sealing of the gate. Each follows a pattern recognizable across mystical traditions. First, the isolation, a state of withdrawal from ordinary consciousness. Second, the invocation, the repetition of sounds or symbols that alter perception. Third, the revelation, when the boundaries dissolve and something beyond the self appears. Shamans, monks, and magicians throughout history have described identical experiences under different names. What makes the Necronomicon unique is its refusal to moralize them. It doesn't speak of good or evil. It speaks of alignment, the human tuning itself to the frequency of the cosmos, regardless of the cost. Some readers claim that the book describes a geography of alternate realities, planes inhabited by the great old ones, spaces of pure sound, and cities where time runs backward. A chilling parallel exists in physics, the idea of multidimensional membranes, invisible universes layered over ours. Lovecraft, writing decades before string theory, intuited that reality might not be singular. When he wrote that there are doors that should never be opened, he wasn't only describing magic, he was describing consciousness itself, the fragile door between sanity and infinity. In the 1980s, a psychologist named Colin Wilson analyzed why people who believed in the Necronomicon often reported similar hallucinations. His conclusion was provocative. The rituals acted as a psychological key. They triggered what Jung called active imagination, a state where archetypes take on life. In that space, shadows become voices, and the mind externalizes its deepest fears. But here's the paradox. Even if it's all in the mind, the experience feels real. The gate doesn't have to exist in the desert or in ancient ruins. It opens within the reader. That's why the book still works, even as fiction. It's coded to awaken something already waiting inside us. Spiritually, the idea of gatekeepers appears everywhere. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol speaks of terrifying deities that guard the path between life and death. The Kabbalistic texts describe angels guarding the thresholds of divine emanations. The Necronomicon translates that symbolism into cosmic language. The watchers at the gate are not gods or demons, but reflections of our readiness. The uninitiated see them as monsters. The wise see them as thresholds of understanding. So what are we really summoning when we read the Necronomicon? Perhaps not entities from another dimension, but fragments of our own. Each ritual, each symbol, acts like a mirror held up to the psyche. It strips away illusion and forces us to face the part of ourselves that exists beyond reason, the part that dreams, fears, and creates. In that sense, the Necronomicon is not a guide to the supernatural. It's a map of human consciousness at its breaking point. And yet the mystery remains. Why do so many who delve into it claim to feel watched afterward? Why do they dream of cities submerged in green light or hear whispers in dead languages? Maybe the book itself has become a gate, not between worlds, but between collective imagination and reality. Each time someone opens it, the myth breathes again, reminding us that between belief and madness lies the thinnest veil of all. In 1979, a psychology professor at Columbia University named Dr. Robert Price ran an experiment on belief. He handed a group of students a few pages of Latin text, telling them it came from the legendary Necronomicon. He gave the same text to another group, but told them it was a medieval prayer. Both groups read the same words, yet their reactions were worlds apart. Those who believed it was the Necronomicon reported unease, insomnia, and even strange dreams. The others felt peace. Some said they felt closer to God. The text was meaningless. The difference was belief. That experiment revealed something chilling. The human mind doesn't just interpret reality, it creates it. And that's precisely the kind of revelation that lies at the core of the Necronomicon. The book's true power isn't in its rituals or symbols. It's in the mirror it holds to our hunger for forbidden knowledge. Throughout Lovecraft's mythos, readers of the Necronomicon always meet the same fate, madness. But not because the book is cursed. They go mad because they see too much. They grasp truths their minds cannot contain. This is where fiction meets philosophy. In Plato's allegory of the cave, the man who sees the light is blinded when he returns. The same blindness strikes Lovecraft scholars. They step outside the illusion of normalcy and never return whole. Psychologically, this reflects what Carl Jung called the encounter with the shadow. The Necronomicon is the shadow of humanity itself. All the suppressed questions, fears, and desires we bury under logic. When someone opens that book, in the story or in imagination, they symbolically open that shadow. They meet the part of themselves that craves infinite power, yet trembles before it. That's why Lovecraft's characters often start as rational men, scientists, professors, historians, and end up whispering to the darkness. The book doesn't corrupt them, it reveals them. But why are we so drawn to the forbidden? History repeats this pattern. Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge not because they're evil, but because curiosity defines humanity. Prometheus steals fire from the gods and suffers for it, yet that fire becomes civilization. Every myth warns us about crossing limits, yet every generation crosses them again, through science, technology, or spirituality. The Necronomicon is simply that archetype in literary form. It's the forbidden book that tempts the reader with a single question. Would you look if you could? Lovecraft understood this instinct deeply. In one letter he wrote, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. But behind that fear lies desire, the longing to know." Modern psychologists see the same duality in our fascination with horror. We watch, we read, we explore the darkness because at some level it makes us feel alive. The Necronomicon channels that energy perfectly. It offers the illusion of ultimate knowledge, the secrets of creation, the names of cosmic gods, the mechanisms of reality, and then punishes those who reach for it. It's both a trap and a lesson. Even outside fiction, the pattern holds. Nuclear power, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, all are modern Necronomicons, gifts of immense power that test our restraint. We often fear the consequences, yet we cannot look away. That's why the book continues to haunt the collective imagination. It speaks to the eternal tension between curiosity and control, between knowledge and madness. In esoteric traditions, true wisdom always requires descent, a symbolic death before rebirth. The mystic enters darkness to find light. The scientist dismantles nature to understand it. The Necronomicon dramatizes that descent. Its pages lead the reader downward, through invocations, revelations, and finally collapse. But what's destroyed is not the soul, it's the illusion of separation. Those who survive the experience, in Lovecraft's tales or in spiritual metaphor, emerge transformed. They've seen that power without wisdom is madness, but wisdom without courage is stagnation. That's the paradox the Necronomicon teaches. Knowledge itself isn't evil, it's neutral. What corrupts it is human intention. The same fire that warms can burn, the same truth that liberates can destroy. And so Lovecraft's grimoires become philosophical rather than satanic. They're not manuals for summoning demons. They're metaphors for confronting the one that lives inside us. The need to dominate, to understand everything, to bend the universe to our will. Maybe that's why the Necronomicon still whispers through our culture, in films, music, and the occult underground. It's not a book about monsters. It's a book about us. Every time we chase knowledge without conscience, we write another page. Every time we mistake control for wisdom, the gate opens a little wider. The madness Lovecraft feared wasn't cosmic, it was human. So when we speak of forbidden knowledge, we're not talking about some dusty grimoire lost in time. We're talking about the moment we realize that the abyss we fear is our own reflection staring back. In 1977, a mysterious black-bound book appeared on the shelves of a small New York bookstore. It bore a single title in gold, The Necronomicon. No author, no publisher. Within weeks, it sold out. By the end of the decade, more than 500,000 copies had circulated across the United States. Some swore it was the authentic translation of Lovecraft's forbidden text. Others dismissed it as a hoax. But something extraordinary happened. People began to believe. The fiction had crossed a threshold. It had become faith. The so-called Simon Necronomicon, named after its anonymous editor, was filled with Sumerian invocations, sigils, and descriptions of cosmic deities resembling those in Lovecraft's universe. It linked the old ones with the gods of ancient Mesopotamia, Marduk, Tiamat, Nergal, creating a bridge between myth and modern imagination. Readers didn't just read it, they practiced it. They drew circles, chanted the incantations, waited for signs. Some reported visions of endless deserts and black suns. Others claimed electrical disturbances, cold drafts, or the sense of an invisible presence in the room. Even after the author Simon was revealed to be Peter Levender, a scholar of esotericism, the myth didn't die, it multiplied. Levender admitted that the text was a pastiche, but he also confessed that strange coincidences surrounded its creation. Lights flickered in the printing room, pages went missing overnight, and those involved in its publication all dreamed of the same thing, a colossal shadow moving beneath the sea. Rationally, it was explainable. Psychologically, it was viral. The Necronomicon had evolved into a living meme, a self-replicating myth infecting minds across generations. But why did so many intelligent people, scientists, artists, occultists, fall under its spell? Because the book filled a void modern society had forgotten, the hunger for mystery. In an age of rationalism, people still longed for awe, for something vast and unexplainable. The Necronomicon offered that, a mythology for the disenchanted. It became, as one anthropologist described, the Bible of postmodern spirituality. Not because it was true, but because it felt true. And feelings, when shared by enough people, create their own reality. Musicians embraced it too. Metal bands like Morbid Angel, Iron Maiden, and even Black Sabbath drew inspiration from its imagery. Filmmakers like Sam Raimi used it in The Evil Dead, transforming it into the Naturom Demonto, a cursed volume bound in human skin. What began as Lovecraft's literary invention turned into a pop cultural relic, an icon of transgression. Yet beneath the horror tropes and theatrics, something deeper stirred, a spiritual rebellion. The Necronomicon became a symbol for those seeking power outside dogma, those who wanted to touch mystery directly, without priests, churches, or intermediaries. Sociologists later coined a term for this phenomenon, hyperstition, a self-fulfilling myth that becomes real through belief. The Necronomicon is the perfect case study. Its existence was never confirmed, yet millions acted as if it were. Over time, that belief generated physical artifacts, printed editions, rituals, testimonies, communities. Fiction birthed form. And through that process, Lovecraft's nightmare transformed into a mirror of humanity's creative power. Spiritually, this blurring of fiction and faith isn't new. Medieval grimoires like the Book of Abramelin or the Lesser Key of Solomon also emerged from mythic origins, later solidified by centuries of ritual. The Necronomicon simply accelerated that process in the modern age. What once took centuries of oral tradition now took decades of mass media. The myth adapted, mutated, and survived. Even skeptics who dismissed it still contributed to its power by keeping its name alive. Psychologists studying the phenomenon found that belief in the Necronomicon often produced similar emotional effects to traditional religion: awe, fear, surrender, transformation. But unlike religion, it had no dogma, only experience. In that sense, it became the perfect reflection of the 20th century's spiritual crisis. It offered no salvation, only confrontation. It told readers not what to believe, but what they were afraid to believe. Today, multiple versions of the Necronomicon exist: the Hay Necronomicon, the George Hay edition, the Tyson Necronomicon, each claiming to restore or reinterpret Lovecraft's vision. None agree on its content, yet all share the same essence: a bridge between imagination and the unknown, and that's what makes it timeless, because every generation writes its own Necronomicon, through science, through art, through the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of chaos. So maybe the book was never meant to be found in a library. Maybe it was meant to live inside us, evolving each time someone dares to ask what's real. That's the hidden legacy of the Necronomicon. It teaches us that belief is not the enemy of truth, it's the engine that creates it. When fiction becomes faith, reality bends. And somewhere in that bending, between imagination and revelation, the whisper of Lovecraft's mad dream still echoes, alive, unending, waiting for another reader to turn the page. By 2025, more than 12 million people had searched for the Necronomicon online. Thousands of digital versions circulate in hidden forums, and new readers appear every day convinced they've found the authentic one. But maybe that's the point, that there is no single Necronomicon. Maybe the book's true form isn't on paper at all, but in the human mind. The deeper you look, the more it reflects you back to yourself. And that's where the final revelation begins. Lovecraft never claimed the book existed, yet he described it with such precision that it began to behave like a living archetype. That's what philosophers like Jean Baudrillard later called hyperreality, when the imitation becomes more real than the original. The Necronomicon isn't just a story, it's a mirror of our age. We live surrounded by invisible forces, data, algorithms, ideas that shape our lives more powerfully than any spell. The book, in this light, becomes a metaphor for how knowledge itself has turned occult. We all hold grimoires now, except ours glow with screens instead of candlelight. But let's return to the text itself. What does it ultimately reveal? Between its invocations, its cosmologies, and its maddening geometry, the Necronomicon repeats a single message. Everything is connected. The stars, the atoms, the mind, the abyss, all part of one vast intelligence. To understand it is to risk dissolution. That's why the book drives readers mad, because it strips away the illusion of separateness. Psychologically, this is the same experience mystics described during Enlightenment, the boundary between self and universe collapsing into one. The difference is that mystics prepare for it through years of discipline. The Necronomicon throws you in without warning. Esoterically, the book's old ones are not literal monsters. They are metaphors for primordial forces, chaos, time, entropy, and fear itself. In ancient Mesopotamian texts, Tiamat represents the sea of chaos from which all creation arises. Lovecraft's Cthulhu is her echo, not evil but indifferent, embodying the raw energy that precedes order. The book's supposed rituals aren't about summoning demons, but confronting them, the demons of the mind, the buried instincts, the unbearable truths. The Necronomicon becomes, in this sense, a spiritual initiation disguised as horror. Every invocation, every forbidden passage can be read symbolically as a psychological map. That is not dead which can eternal lie. Perhaps that line isn't about ancient gods, but about the unconscious itself, which never dies, only waits. Freud called it the return of the repressed. Jung called it individuation. Lovecraft called it madness. But it's the same process, facing the darkness to recover wholeness. The book destroys the weak ego, but in doing so it reveals something timeless, the capacity of the human spirit to confront infinity and survive it. Many who studied Lovecraft's life noticed that his writings evolved from horror toward cosmic philosophy. Behind the monsters, he was describing a worldview, one in which the universe is vast, cold, and unfeeling, yet paradoxically awe-inspiring. The Necronomicon distills that worldview into symbol. It whispers that meaning doesn't come from the cosmos, it comes from us. The book terrifies us because it removes the safety net. There is no divine plan, no savior, no mercy. And yet in that void it offers freedom, the freedom to create our own meaning, our own light in the darkness. That's why, despite its fictional origins, the Necronomicon continues to transform readers. Some see it as a warning against obsession, others as a coded path to self-awareness. Its message is timeless. Power without understanding destroys, but knowledge tempered with humility awakens. In that balance lies true magic, not the ability to summon gods, but the courage to face the one within. So what is the Necronomicon really? A hoax? A myth? A mirror? Maybe all of them. Lovecraft invented it as a literary device, yet in doing so he proved a spiritual truth older than any religion, that imagination shapes reality. Every idea we believe in, every fear we feed, takes form. The Necronomicon is the proof that fiction can summon gods, not from the outer cosmos but from the depths of our collective mind. And that's the final revelation. The book was never about calling something in, it was about waking something up. The real gate isn't hidden in ruins or rituals, it's inside consciousness itself. The abyss it describes isn't out there, it's the infinite inside every human being, the place where wonder and terror meet. To read the Necronomicon is to stand at that threshold and decide, do we look away or do we dare to see what's beyond? Because once you've looked, truly looked, the book no longer needs to exist. You carry it with you. Every dream, every question, every silent moment in front of the unknown becomes another page. The final secret is simple, terrifying, and liberating. We are the authors now.